My name is Margaret. I'm 56 years old, a retired real estate attorney in Portland, Oregon, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought my son understood the meaning of gratitude. I was wrong. The words came out of his mouth so casually, like he was asking me to pass the salt. Mom, you're going to need to stay in the shed until we figure something else out. I stood in the doorway of my own bedroom, the bedroom I'd slept in for 30 years, the room where I'd nursed him through midnight fevers, and read him stories until my voice went hoarse, watched my son, Daniel, avoid my eyes while his pregnant wife, Ashley, examined her manicured nails with the satisfied expression of someone who just won a game I hadn't known we were playing. What I didn't know that Tuesday afternoon was that this moment would become the catalyst for the most satisfying revelation of my life. By the end of the week, my son would discover truths about his mother that would fundamentally alter his understanding of power, sacrifice, and the woman who'd raised him. And Ashley, she would learn that pregnancy doesn't grant you the right to dismantle someone else's entire existence. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the moment when my carefully constructed maternal patience finally cracked. The shed, I repeated, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. The shed was a converted garage at the back of the property, weatherproofed. Yes, with electricity and heat, but still a shed. Daniel, that's not even properly insulated for winter. Ashley shifted on the bed, my bed, with its memory foam mattress I'd saved 3 months to buy, and placed both hands on her swollen belly with theatrical precision. I need the space, Margaret. The baby needs the space. Surely you understand that a pregnant woman's comfort comes first. Here's what they don't tell you about raising children. Sometimes they grow into adults who forget you're a person with needs that extend beyond their convenience. And here's what they definitely don't tell you about YouTube. The algorithm decides who gets to see the ending of this story based on one thing: engagement. If you're not subscribed, if you don't leave a comment telling me where you're watching from, YouTube assumes you're not interested and stops showing you the content. I've watched people spend hours searching for endings they never got to find. Don't let that be you. Subscribe right now. Comment your city below. Because what happens in the next 48 hours, even I didn't see it coming, and I'm the one who orchestrated it. So let me take you back to where it really started. Not to that Tuesday, but to 30 years earlier, when I made decisions that would change everything. The house in Portland's Hawthorne district wasn't always mine. I bought it in 1995, 6 months after my divorce from Daniel's father, a man whose greatest talent was making me feel small. The down payment came from money my own mother had left me, $47,000. That represented every dollar she'd saved working double shifts as a nurse for 40 years. I remember standing in the empty living room, 26 years old with a 3-year-old son, thinking, this is where we survive, or this is where we break. We survived. I put myself through law school taking night classes while Daniel slept in a playpen in the corner of my bedroom. I studied real estate law because houses ownership, protection, the legal fortress of property rights felt like the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting under my feet. I graduated top of my class. I built a practice that specialized in protecting women's assets during divorce proceedings. And every single document I filed, every single case I won, I thought about that house in Hawthorne, my house, the fortress I'd built from my mother's sacrifice and my own spine. Daniel never knew about the mortgage I paid off in 15 years instead of 30. Sacrificing vacations and new cars and anything that wasn't strictly necessary. He never knew about the second job I took for 5 years, reviewing contracts for a firm downtown, just to build a nest egg that would ensure he could go to college without drowning in debt. He knew I was a lawyer. He knew we were comfortable. He didn't know the architecture of sacrifice that had built his comfortable life. And maybe that was my mistake, Mom. Daniel's voice cut through my thoughts, pulling me back. To the present moment, to the bedroom where my daughter-in-law was examining throw pillows like she was already redecorating. Did you hear what I said? About the shed? I looked at my son, 33 years old, working in tech sales, wearing a shirt I'd bought him last Christmas. His face held that particular expression of discomfort mixed with determination that meant he'd already made his decision and was just waiting for me to accept it. Ashley had trained him well in these past 2 years of marriage. I heard you, I said quietly. Then, because I've never been good at hiding what I feel, I'm just trying to understand how we got here, to the moment where you're asking your mother to sleep in a shed so your wife can have a bigger closet. It's not about the closet, Ashley started, but Daniel cut her off with a hand on her arm. Mom, don't make this harder than it has to be. Ashley's 8 months pregnant. Her doctor said she needs to reduce stress. We need the space. And this is the only solution that makes sense right now. The only solution. I kept my voice level, though something hot and sharp was building in my throat. Daniel, this is a 4-bedroom house. You have your room, the baby has the nursery. There's the guest room. What exactly about my master bedroom is essential to Ashley's pregnancy? The attached bathroom, Ashley said, her voice taking on that edge of patience with and reasonable that she'd perfected. I can't be walking down the hall 5 times a night to pee, Margaret. I need an ensuite. And your room is the only one with a bathroom setup that works. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. Instead, I did what I'd learned to do during 30 years of contentious negotiations. I went very, very still. I see, I said. And when did you both decide this? The glance they exchanged told me everything. Days ago, maybe weeks. They'd discussed it, planned it, decided my fate over breakfast or during pillow talk, and only now when they'd already mentally moved my furniture gathered to inform me. We're telling you now, Daniel said, and there was something in his tone that made me see him differently. Not as my son, but as a man who'd confused his mother's generosity with weakness. Come on, Mom, you're being dramatic. The shed is fine. It's temporary. How temporary? Another glance between them. Longer this time. We'll figure it out after the baby comes, Ashley said, which meant never. Which meant adjust to your new reality, old woman, because we're staying and you're the one who needs to shrink? I looked around my bedroom one more time. At the reading chair by the window where I'd spent countless early mornings with coffee and legal briefs. At the closet that held 30 years of my life in fabric form. At the photographs on the dresser, Daniel's school pictures, my parents' wedding photos, the single picture I kept of my ex-husband, because Daniel was standing next to him, gap-toothed and 7. Okay, I said. Daniel's shoulders dropped with relief. Really, Mom, thank you. I knew you'd understand. I said, okay. I didn't say I understood. I walked to the closet and pulled out my largest suitcase. I'll need about an hour to pack my immediate necessities. Take your time, Ashley said, already eyeing the space where my dresser stood. We're not in a rush, but I was. I packed methodically. Clothes for a week, toiletries, laptop, the metal lockbox I kept in the back of my closet that neither of them had ever asked about. I worked in silence while they waited downstairs, probably already planning the bedroom renovation, discussing paint colors and where to put Ashley's vanity. When I came down 40 minutes later, suitcase in one hand and the lockbox tucked under my arm, Daniel actually looked concerned. Mom, you don't need to take everything. I'm taking what I need, I said. I walked past him to the front door, set down my suitcase, and pulled out my phone. What are you doing? Ashley had appeared in the living room archway, her hand on her belly in that protective gesture that I'd once found touching but now recognized as emotional manipulation. Making a phone call, I said, and dialed a number I had memorized but never thought I'd actually use. It rang twice. Law offices of Patricia Chen, came the crisp voice on the other end. Patricia, it's Margaret Sullivan. I need you to execute Protocol 7. There was a pause. Then, are you certain? Completely? I'll have someone there in 20 minutes? I hung up. Daniel was staring at me like I'd started speaking in tongues. Who was that? Protocol 7. Mom, what are you talking about? You'll see. I sat down on my suitcase with the serenity of someone who'd just set a very satisfying trap. We'll wait together. The next 18 minutes were excruciating. Ashley tried to go back upstairs, but something about my expression made her stay. Daniel paced. I sat on my suitcase in the entryway of my own house, watching the clock on my phone and feeling something I hadn't felt in years. The particular satisfaction that comes from knowing you're about to teach someone a lesson they'll never forget. At minute 19, a black Mercedes pulled up outside. At minute 20, my son's life changed forever. The man who emerged from the Mercedes wore a suit that cost more than Daniel's monthly salary. He was 60, black, with silver at his temples, and the kind of presence that makes people instinctively stand straighter. He walked up my front path carrying a leather briefcase, and when I opened the door before he could knock, he gave me the smallest nod of acknowledgement. Mrs. Sullivan, Thomas, thank you for coming so quickly. Who the hell is this? Daniel had found his voice, though it came out higher than usual. The man Thomas Chen, Patricia's husband and the senior partner of Chen and Associates, turned to my son with the expression of someone about to deliver very bad news. With impeccable professionalism, I'm Thomas Chen. I'm your mother's attorney. May I come in? Mom, what is going on? I didn't answer. I just stepped aside and let Thomas enter. He moved into the living room, my living room, which I'd furnished over 30 years with pieces I'd chosen and paid for, and set his briefcase on the coffee table with a soft click. I'll need everyone to sit down, Thomas said. It wasn't a request. We sat, Daniel and Ashley on the couch they'd given me for Mother's Day. 3 years ago, me in the armchair I'd bought the week I made partner at my firm. Thomas remained standing, and when he opened his briefcase, I watched my son's face go from confused to alarmed. What is this? Ashley's voice had lost its commanding edge. This, Thomas said, pulling out a document, is the deed to this property at 4237 Hawthorne Boulevard, Portland, Oregon. Current owner, Margaret Ann Sullivan. Sole owner. As of 1995 and continuing to present day, the silence that followed was so complete I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. I don't understand, Daniel said slowly. Of course, the house is in Mom's name, but we live here. We're family. She wouldn't, Mr. Sullivan. I'm not here to discuss what your mother would or wouldn't do. I'm here to inform you that as of 4:47 p.m. today, you and your wife are being formally asked to vacate the premises. Vacate? Ashley's voice cracked. You can't be serious. Thomas looked at me. I nodded. I'm entirely serious. Mrs. Sullivan has instructed me to begin eviction proceedings. However, as a courtesy, she's willing to give you 48 hours to remove yourselves and your belongings voluntarily. If you're not gone by Thursday at 5 p.m., I'll file the paperwork with the court, and the process will become significantly more unpleasant for everyone involved. I watched the blood drain from my son's face. Mom, he whispered, you can't do this. Where are we supposed to go? And there it was. The question I'd been waiting for. The question that revealed everything about how he'd thought about the situation, about me, about the architecture of our relationship. I stood up, walked over to where Thomas had spread the documents on the coffee table, picked up the deed and held it so Daniel could see my name on it, alone, with no one else having any legal claim to the walls around us. Daniel, I said quietly, where was I supposed to go? He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. The shed, he finally said. But that's different. You're my mom. You'd understand. You always understand. No, I said. That's where you're wrong. I'm not your mother in this moment. I'm the owner of this property. And you just tried to make me homeless in my own house so your wife could have a bigger bathroom. We weren't making you homeless. What do you call it when you ask someone to leave their bedroom and sleep in an uninsulated shed? What do you call it when you make decisions about someone's home without consulting them? Ashley found her voice. This is insane. You're seriously going to throw out your pregnant daughter-in-law over a bedroom? I turned to her slowly. Ashley, do you know how I bought this house? She blinked. Daniel said you got it in the divorce. No, I bought it 6 months after the divorce. With money my mother left me when she died. Money she earned working double shifts for 40 years as a nurse, saving every penny she could so her daughter might have something when she was gone. I felt my voice getting thicker, but I didn't stop. My mother never owned a home. She rented apartments her whole life. And with her last gift to me, I bought this house. This house where I raised my son alone. This house where I studied for the bar exam at the kitchen table. This house that represents every sacrifice I made to give Daniel a stable life. Mom, Daniel's voice broke. I never told you how hard those years were, I continued, looking at him. Now, how I worked 2 jobs so you could have the childhood I never did. How I paid off the mortgage in 15 years instead of 30 so you wouldn't have to worry about losing your home if something happened to me. How I built a nest egg so you could go to college without debt. I never told you because I didn't want you to feel guilty. I wanted you to feel secure. Tears were running down Daniel's face now. I didn't know. No, you didn't. Because I protected you from knowing. And somewhere along the way, you confused my protection with permission to take whatever you wanted. Thomas cleared his throat gently. Mrs. Sullivan, shall I proceed with the paperwork? I looked at my son, at his tears, his shock, his dawning understanding of how badly he'd miscalculated. Part of me, the mother part, the part that had rocked him through nightmares and celebrated every milestone, wanted to stop this now. To say it was all a lesson, that of course he could stay, that family forgives. But there was another part of me. The part that had signed the divorce papers at 25. The part that had pushed through law school while other students went to parties. The part that had learned, through blood and sacrifice, that sometimes love means teaching people they can't treat you like a doormat. Give them the full 48 hours, I said. And Thomas, thank you for coming so quickly. He packed up his briefcase with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. I'll be in touch tomorrow to confirm arrangements. Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan, you have until Thursday at 5 p.m. I strongly suggest you use that time wisely. After he left, the 3 of us sat in my living room, soon to be just my living room again. The silence was so heavy, it felt like drowning. Finally, Ashley spoke, her voice small. Where are we supposed to go? I almost laughed. Instead, I said, you both have jobs. You have savings, at least, I assume you have savings, since you've been living here. Rent-free for 2 years? You have options. Just like you assumed I had options when you told me to go sleep in a shed. It's not the same. It's exactly the same. The only difference is power. And you both just learned where the power actually lives in this house. Daniel wiped his face with the back of his hand. And for a moment he looked 12 again, caught in a lie about homework, trying to find the words that would make everything okay. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. Ashley was upset, and the pregnancy hormones, and I wanted to make her happy. I didn't think about what it would mean for you. No, I agreed. You didn't think about me at all. You thought about Ashley's comfort. You thought about the baby. You thought about your stress levels and your sleep and your convenience. But you didn't think about the woman who made all of this possible. Ashley was crying now to ugly tears that smeared her mascara. Please, Margaret, please. I was wrong. I see that now. But we don't have anywhere to go. Not in 48 hours. And I'm 8 months pregnant. I looked at her belly, at the curve that held my first grandchild. The baby who would come into this world in a month and need to learn about kindness and respect and the difference between asking and taking. You should have thought about that before you decided my bedroom was yours, I said. But my voice was softer now. The next 24 hours were strange. Daniel and Ashley didn't leave the house. Where would they go? But they didn't talk to me either. They moved through the rooms like ghosts, occasionally carrying boxes up from the basement, making phone calls in hushed voices. I stayed in my bedroom, my reclaimed bedroom, and tried to figure out what I was actually doing, because the truth was more complicated than a simple lesson in boundaries. The truth was that I was 56 years old and tired of being taken for granted, tired of being the soft place everyone landed without anyone asking if I needed softness too. Tired of watching my son grow into the kind of man who could look at his mother and see a problem to be solved, rather than a person to be considered. But I was also a mother. And mothers don't stop being mothers just because their children hurt them. At 10 p.m. on Wednesday night, there was a knock on my bedroom door. "Come in." Daniel entered, and the expression on his face was so raw it hurt to look at directly. "We found a place," he said. "A furnished rental in Selwood, month to month. It's expensive, but we can manage it." "Good, Mom." He sat on the edge of my bed, in the spot where he used to sit when he was little and had a nightmare. "I need to tell you something." I waited. "I've been an asshole." The word sounded wrong in his mouth. He'd always been the polite child, the one who said please and thank you without being reminded. Not just this week, for a long time. Since I got married, maybe longer, I've been taking you for granted. Yes, I agreed, because there was no point in pretending otherwise. Ashley and I, we got comfortable. Living here, not paying rent, having you cook dinner half the time. We started thinking of this as our house, our space, and somehow we forgot it was yours first. Daniel, do you know what scared me most when your father and I got divorced? He shook his head. It wasn't the money, though God knows that was terrifying. It wasn't being alone, though that was hard, too. It was the thought that I might raise you to be like him. Selfish, entitled, unable to see past your own needs. Mom, let me finish. For 30 years, I've been watching you, looking for signs. And most of the time, you were kind, thoughtful, a good man. But this week, when you looked at me and told me to sleep in a shed, I saw your father's face, and it broke something in me. Daniel was openly crying now, the kind of crying that comes from deep in the chest. I'm not him. I swear to God, Mom, I'm not him. Then prove it. I took his hand, the way I used to when he was small and scared, not to me. To yourself. Figure out what kind of man you want to be. What kind of father you want to be. Because that baby is coming in a month, and children learn by watching what we do, not what we say we'll do. I'm so sorry. I know you are, but sorry isn't enough. Sorry is just words. I need to see change. He nodded, wiping his face. We're still leaving tomorrow, even though I think maybe you might let us stay, but we need to leave. I need to learn how to provide for my family without using you as a safety net. I felt something crack open in my chest. Pride, maybe, or hope. That's very mature of you. I learned it from watching you. He laughed, bitter and young. Even if it took me 33 years to actually learn it. Thursday afternoon, I watched my son and his wife load the last boxes into a U-Haul. Ashley had barely spoken to me since the eviction notice, but as she climbed into the passenger seat, she turned back and caught my eye. I'm sorry too, she said. For what it's worth, I was treating you like you were disposable, and you're not. You're Daniel's mother, and you're going to be my child's grandmother. And I should have respected that. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was real. Ashley, I called out. She paused. Being a mother is the hardest thing I've ever done. And the most important. You're going to make mistakes. Everyone does. But if you remember that your child is watching and learning from everything you do, you'll do fine. She nodded, tears on her face again, and climbed into the truck. I stood on my front porch, my house, my fortress, and watched them drive away. and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel: grief. Not for the relationship we'd had, but for the one we could have had if we'd been honest with each other sooner. That night, I walked through the empty house. 4 bedrooms, quiet and mine. I ended up in Daniel's old room, still decorated with his high school trophies and posters he'd never taken down. On his desk was a photograph I'd forgotten about. The two of us at his college graduation, both grinning, his arm around my shoulders. I'd been so proud that day. Proud that I'd given him opportunities I never had. Proud that he was going out into the world equipped to succeed. But I'd forgotten to teach him something crucial: that success means nothing if you achieve it by stepping on the people who lifted you up. Maybe he was learning that now. 3 weeks later, on a Sunday morning, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, Daniel stood there, holding a coffee from the Stumptown Roasters on Division Street, my usual order, which meant he'd remembered an envelope. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. We sat in the living room, and he handed me the coffee and the envelope. Inside was a check for $24,000. "What is this? Rent?" For the 2 years we lived here, I calculated what a fair market rate would be for a room in this neighborhood, and that's what we owe you. It's from our savings. We had been saving for a down payment on a house, but this is more important. I stared at the check. "Daniel, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. We took advantage of you. We used you. And I need to make that right before I can look at myself in the mirror, and definitely before I can be the kind of father I want to be." "How's Ashley?" "Tired, scared, excited. She's doing good. We're doing good. Actually, the apartment is small, but it's ours. We're learning how to be partners instead of me being a man-child who lets his wife push around his mother." I laughed, surprising both of us. "That's a very specific self-assessment." "Yeah, well, therapy is helping with the self-awareness." He smiled, tentative. "I've been seeing someone to work through why I thought any of that was okay. To figure out how to set boundaries with Ashley without disrespecting you in the process. I'm proud of you." His eyes got bright. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Will you come to the hospital when the baby's born? Ashley really wants you there, and so do I." I felt tears threatening. "I would be honored, and maybe after, when we're settled with the baby, we could do Sunday dinners. Here or at our place. I don't care. I just want my kid to know their grandmother. To learn from you the way I should have been learning all along. I'd like that very much." He set down his coffee and looked at me with something like wonder. "How did you know that I needed this lesson? That it would work?" "I didn't know it would work. I just knew I couldn't keep letting you treat me like an afterthought. Sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes it means letting the people you love face consequences, even when it breaks your heart to do it." "It broke mine too," he admitted, realizing what I'd become. What we'd both become. "But you're fixing it. That's what matters." 4 weeks later, at 3:47 a.m. on a Wednesday, I got the call. Ashley was in labor. I drove to OHSU Hospital through empty streets, and when I arrived, Daniel met me in the hallway outside the delivery room, his face pale and awestruck. "It's a girl," he said. "Mom, I have a daughter." I followed him into the room, where Ashley lay exhausted and radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a pink blanket. When she saw me, she smiled a real smile, tired and genuine. "Do you want to hold your granddaughter?" I took the baby carefully, this perfect small creature who weighed almost nothing and everything simultaneously. She had Daniel's nose and Ashley's mouth and my mother's hands. I recognized the shape of them immediately. The long fingers that my mother had used to heal people for 40 years. "What's her name?" Daniel and Ashley exchanged a look. "Margaret," Ashley said softly. "We're calling her Margaret Ann, after you, if that's okay." I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Just held this child who carried my name and my mother's name, and represented everything I'd fought for and feared for and hoped for. She's perfect. I finally managed. She is, Daniel agreed. And Mom, I'm going to make sure she knows her grandmother, the real you, not just the mom who made sacrifices, though she know about those too, but the woman who was strong enough to teach me that love doesn't mean accepting disrespect, that family doesn't mean free for all, that you can be kind and still have boundaries. I looked down at baby Margaret, at her tiny face scrunched in sleep, and thought about the lessons we passed down, the ones we learn and the ones we teach and the ones we're still figuring out as we go. Your grandmother would have loved her, I told Daniel. My mother, the one who gave me the money for the house. She would have been so proud to meet her namesake. Tell me about her, Ashley said. I realized I don't know much about your family, about where you came from, so I did. I told them about my mother's double shifts and my father's early death, about the apartment we lived in with the broken radiator and the view of a brick wall, about how my mother used to say that the most important thing she could give me was roots, a sense of where I came from, courage to fly somewhere better. I told them about the day she died, how she made me promise I'd buy something permanent with her savings. Land, Margaret, she'd said, her voice already fading. Own land. Own a place they can't take from you. And I told them about the day I bought the house in Hawthorne. How I'd stood in the empty living room and felt my mother with me, proud and fierce and certain that I'd survive. I almost sold it, I admitted. Last year, before you two moved in, the neighborhood had gotten expensive, and I could have made a fortune. But I couldn't do it. Because it wasn't just a house. It was everything my mother worked for. Everything I worked for. It was the proof that we made it. Daniel was crying again. He'd become quite the crier in these past few weeks, and he reached over to put his hand on my shoulder. Thank you for not selling it. Thank you for not letting me turn it into something meaningless. Thank you for loving me enough to teach me this lesson, even when it hurt. I looked at my son, holding his daughter, sitting next to his wife, and saw the man he was becoming. Not perfect, still learning, but trying, genuinely trying, to be better than he was. That's what mothers do. I said, we love you enough to let you fail. And we love you enough to be there when you figure out how to get back up. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my living room, my beautiful, quiet, perfectly mine living room, drinking coffee and watching the morning light come through the windows. Daniel and Ashley and baby Margaret live across town in a house they just bought. Not as big as mine, but theirs. Earned through their own work and savings. They come for Sunday dinner every week. Daniel helps me with the yard work I'm getting too old to do easily. Ashley has started asking me for advice about balancing motherhood and career. She's going back to work part-time next month and is terrified and excited in equal measure. And Margaret, baby Margaret's crawling now, pulling herself up on furniture, determined to walk even though she keeps falling down. She reminds me of myself at her age, of her grandmother, my mother, of all of us who learned that falling down is just part of getting somewhere worth going. Last Sunday, as they were leaving, Daniel turned at the door and said, "Thank you, Mom." For what? For the shed? For making me leave? For teaching me what I should have learned 30 years ago? I smiled. Anytime. And I meant it. Because that's the thing about being a mother. You never stop teaching, and you never stop learning. You just hope that by the end, the lessons land where they're supposed to. In the heart, where they can grow into wisdom. In the hands, where they can build something lasting. In the next generation, who will need those lessons even if they don't know it yet. My mother bought me wings. I bought myself roots. And now I'm watching my son teach his daughter how to fly. That's what I was hiding all along. Not money or power or secret bank accounts. Just this. The knowledge that love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's sacrifice that breeds resentment. It's giving until you disappear. And the most radical thing I could teach. My son was that I refused to disappear. I'm still here. In my house. In my city. Living the life my mother and I built from nothing but determination and the stubborn belief that we deserved to take up space in this world. Daniel learned that lesson the hard way, but he learned it. And now he's teaching it to his daughter, who carries my name and my mother's name, and the weight of all the women who fought to give her the right to take up space too. That's the real inheritance, not the house. Though the house matters, not the money, though the money helps. The real inheritance is this: you are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to have boundaries. You are allowed to say no to the people you love when they're hurting you. And if someone truly loves you back, they'll understand. Eventually, even if it takes sleeping in a shed, metaphorically or literally, to figure it out.